What makes the F-35 such a great aircraft? That's what we're talking about today. My name is Max Villman. I'm a former Swedish Air Force fighter pilot flying the Gripen fighter, and let's go. And the movie we're about to look and react to is published by Lockheed Martin, so the maker of the F-35. Of course, it's a promotional video highlighting all the good stuff about the F-35, so as always, we need to take it with a grain of salt. I can't show you the entire video, unfortunately, because of copyright issues, but I can show you some clips, and I can leave a link down below here in the description if you want to look at the whole video for yourself, which I think you should.
Fighter. Now, there's three variants of the F-35. The F-35A was built for conventional takeoff and landing. The F-35B, which utilizes revolutionary lift fan technology to take off in short distances, accomplish hover operations, and land vertically. And the F-35C, with a larger wing, reinforced landing gear, and a specialized tail hook to permit operations on an aircraft carrier. Now, each variant meets a specific need.
Yeah, and just as this test pilot talked about here, there are three variants of the F-35. They're all single-seater, so no dual-seater variants available. So the A is the normal one, the conventional one, made for big runways, normal runway operations. The B variant is the short takeoff and landing variant, used mainly by the Marine Corps and some other nations for amphibious operations, aircraft carriers. It can make takeoff in a quite short amount of time with sort of like a ramp, for example, and it can also hover and land that way, which makes it so that it doesn't require such a big aircraft carrier or such a big runway. This is of course great for those kinds of operation. And the C variant, as the test pilot talked about, larger wingspan, tail hook for resting wire operations on big aircraft carriers. So all variants are designed for a specific need, just as he mentioned, and the A variant is of course the most potent one. The B variant obviously needs to sacrifice a lot of real estate, fuel, space, etc. Inside the aircraft to be able to have those large fans to land, hover and land. And the C variant gets larger wings, which I think will make the radar cross-section larger and also have other implications with the drag, etc. So the original variant is of course a little bit cheaper, it's still very expensive but a little bit cheaper, and can probably carry the most weapons and fuel, even though the C variant probably gets a little bit larger fuel quantity inside the aircraft. So that's the three variants, and the different nations. The US has all of the variants, and the other nations have decided on different ones, but the biggest number will of course be on the A variant.
So that the overall effect is that the aircraft signature is decreased. Another technique is by the use of the structure of the aircraft. The design of the wings, the fuselage, the tails, everything is combined together with very specific shapes and geometries so that radar reflections can be controlled to the max extent possible. Additionally, weapons and fuel can be carried internally or inside the structure of the aircraft, so the stealth characteristics are maintained while the aircraft is still fully mission capable.
So that was a little bit about the stealth of the F-35, and stealth is, when we talk about stealth, we're talking about 5th gen aircraft. It's usually something that we talk about, either you have stealth or you don't have stealth, but it's actually a sliding scale. So let's take, for example, the Su-57, the PAK-FA, the Soviet or Russian, I should say, newest fighter, should be equivalent to the F-22. That aircraft has a much larger radar cross-section, RCS, which is how we measure these things, than the F-22 or the F-35 in this case. And that is because the F-35 has many things that makes it less radar cross-section. It has radar-absorbent material, radar-absorbent coating. Those things dampen the radar signal. So how a radar finds an object is it sends out a signal, an active signal, and that signal then bounces off an object and comes back. And then when it comes back, you get information of where that object is. So by having radar absorbent material and coating, you reflect a slightly smaller amount, than if you would not have it. And then you have the shapes, which are trying to deflect the radar signal so it doesn't bounce strictly directly back to the radar that sends and emits information to try to find the aircraft. And then the last thing is it doesn't have anything with RCS to do, but you normally also make for the engine so that the heat is not dispersed straightly just in a straight cone, because then it makes it easier for IR missiles to lock onto you. You usually also try to disperse the heat a little bit to make it slightly more difficult for that, but that's more of a signature thing than a stealth thing. Stealth is against radar. And the last part is, of course, having your weapons internally, as was mentioned in the video. So if you would have missiles on the outside, as on the wings, then obviously those missiles can be detected because they are quite large. They have fins, they have their own radars. So there's a lot of things that the radar energy can bounce off of and come back to the emitting radar. So when you have it internally, you don't have any radar signal from radar cross-section from the missiles because they're inside the F-35 in this case. So if you take the example with the F-117, the Nighthawk, during the Kuwait-Iraq War, 91, they actually the Iraqi air defenses weren't able to find the Nighthawks until they opened their doors, their bomb base, to release their bombs, because then there was a radar cross-section increase once the doors open. So for the F-35, you need to carry the stuff, all your bombs and missiles internally, and once you open your doors, you will get a much bigger radar cross-section until you close them again. So you want to open quickly, release your bombs and missiles, and then close. The downside, of course, is that when you carry armament internally, you need a much bigger airframe than you would have needed otherwise, which also, if you look at the F-35 from the front, you see that it's quite a big aircraft, a bulky aircraft, and that in turn makes it so that it gets more drag, and more drag makes it so that you need a bigger engine, and also that you burn more fuel. So one thing that is usually what you call fifth generation, the F-35 is a fifth generation aircraft, but just as stealth, it hasn't been clearly defined what a fifth gen aircraft actually is. So one thing the F-35 does not have is actually supercruise. And a supercruise is when you are able to fly supersonic speeds, so higher than the speed of sound, without using afterburners. So just using your normal engine up to military power, so full throttle. If you're not able to supercruise, you need to use the afterburner if you want to go supersonic, which you usually want to do if you want to fire air-to-air missiles, etc. So the F-22 and I think also this Su-57 has those characteristics, but they also have two engines, of course, and are much bigger airframes. So that's one thing the F-35 does not have, so supercruise. And let's jump back to the video. I'll talk a little bit about the F-35's radar.
That form a beam of radio waves that can be steered and controlled electronically. That means there are no moving parts, and the array is fast, robust, and reliable. It's also capable of suppressing adversary air defense systems through electronic attack by directing RF energy at its targets. This mirrored window is part of the distributed.
So what he was talking about there was the radar, and it's old school radar, so fourth generation radars were usually mechanically turned to send the radar signals. With an AESA radar, actively scanned radar, you are able to send signals without actually needing to move the radar physically in the air within the nose cone, which is of course a huge advantage. You need less moving parts. There can be some positive things about moving an AESA radar as well, because if you want to transmit energy far off to the sides, you get less energy when the radar aperture is facing forwards. So that's a downside of not moving it manually, mechanically. But as we looked in the illustration there, it's very, very quick. You don't need to physically move the radar to track different targets, so you can track multiple targets more easily with AESA radar. And as he also mentioned, the electronic attack, the electronic warfare part of it is that you can suppress enemy radars by sending lots of radar signal into their own radars, making it very difficult for them to track you. Another thing with those kinds of radars is that they can be used passively. He doesn't talk about that so much, but when you have an AESA radar, you can use it passively to not transmit and send information yourself or send electronic energy yourself, which makes it more difficult to detect you if you just go passive. But you can then track and see where other radars are. And we're talking about sensor fusion just in a minute. So if you have several F-35s up they're both using passive mode on the radars, they can actually get information from two different geographical points, and thus they can actually determine where a radar transmitter is in the air, on the ground or in the air, because of their sensor fusion, and that they share information with each other. So that's a huge thing that's coming with fifth generation aircraft, that you have this sensor fusion. You use more than your own aircraft, and you can also use GCI. You can use AVAX, for example, more sensors, ground-based sensors, to get the bigger picture. So let's talk a little bit about, look at what they have to say about sensor fusion in the F-35.
And using it to develop a unique mental picture of the operational environment. The F-35 reduces the pilot's workload by doing that processing for the pilot. The information from all the sensors is fused together to create one ever-evolving operational picture, a picture that is complete, real-time, and instantly usable. This process is called sensor fusion and permits pilots to operate with more speed and precision.
And just to jump back to the previous picture here, it's not just about speed, it's also that you, as we mentioned earlier before the clip, that you get information from more than your own sensors. You also use other airplanes and other assets information and share it automatically, which of course exponentially increases your battle space awareness, because you have more sensors in different locations that you can actually utilize without having to do anything manually, which is huge. And the person with the best information, the best essay, usually wins. So this is a huge thing with the F-35 and modern fighter aircraft in general, is the sensor fusion part and the data link part, where you transfer that information to other players in the area as well. So this is a huge part, and the F-35 has radar, it has other antennas, and it has its own system with cameras, IR sensors, and NVG, night vision goggles capability, which we will look at. So this makes it a really, really potent aircraft. So let's look at the last clip I wanted to show you, which is
Cool part. The DAS acts as an additional set of eyes, giving me greater field of view on the HMDS visor and cues to threats that my eyes may otherwise not see. Since the cameras are outside the aircraft, it allows me to look through the aircraft. I can also switch to night vision without having to switch additional equipment or add it to the helmet. All this helps me make critical decisions faster.
Yeah, so just to bring back that picture, so this is huge. As you see, they don't have a normal HUD, head-up display. Instead, you have the usual cockpit instrumentation, but in this case with a very big, large screen. Excuse me, with the information. But because you have the helmet-mounted display system, HMDS, you have information projected on your display. So if you turn your head, the information is follow you along all the time. So you don't need to turn your head back into the cockpit to get the information. And with their cameras located around the airframe, they can also look through the airframe, which is quite cool, I would say. So in this case, for example, because of the cameras, you don't have the obstruction of the view with the parts of the cockpit here that would normally obstruct your view. Also, you have the flight information all the way. So you have your airspeed, ground speed, your Mach, your Gs, your alpha, your course, heading, altitude, of course, bank indicator, time. All that information is wherever you look all the way. And also, furthermore, which I think is a huge deal, is these sort of squares and triangles that you see here. Those are actually targets or objects. I think triangles represent the ground objects, and rectangles represent, or squares represent air targets or air objects. So you have information presented either from your own radar that has detected that, or that they are transmitting energy. That's a radar that's on the ground, or it's a waypoint or a target point or some sort of other player in the area that's that's sending that data. So you have big SA. You don't just have it on a big map in the cockpit on a display, but you also get it pointed out in the air, which of course increases your SA or situational awareness by a big thing, and also makes it so that you have a much better view of the entire situation. So it's quite a cool thing that you can have cameras looking through the cockpit here. You can switch from IR from CCTV to IR to night vision mode by just clicking without needing to change anything on the helmet like you normally do on 4th generation fighters. So it's quite a big leap forward, I would say. So all in all, the F-35 is of course a very, very potent aircraft. Also very, very expensive, because all of these moving parts, all of these different systems, they require maintenance, of course, and the more systems, the more advanced your systems, the more maintenance it requires. So the more expensive it gets, and the more probability is that something breaks. This is a promotional video from the manufacturer of the F-35, so of course everything is looking very, very good. I don't know the availability of all the systems. I don't know how well everything works actually in the air, but I would assume that it works quite well. I will end it there. It's been a long video already, so thank you for watching, and please give this video a like, a thumbs up, and subscribe to my channel if you want to support me. You can also support me by buying me a coffee on the link below, and my social media and newsletter is also linked below. And until next time, as always, fly safe.